Hello everybody, Sherman here again. Excited to be with you. Give you a little gift in these trying times. Hope you're doing well, staying well. We've covered a lot of stuff, a lot of ground, and I think for some of you it will be familiar ground already. And for those of you who are in that camp and that demographic, I hope that even though some of it's redundant, I hope it fills in some gaps for you, fills in some of the cracks. And sometimes just one little nugget of information can go a long way and can send you down a better path to understand what you already do, but from a different perspective. So hopefully that'll be the case. We've done a lot with the scales, the pentatonic scales, and I showed you how they overlap. I hope that's coming along well. For those of you for whom that's a new experience, it sets you back a little ways, because you go from just playing wild rock and roll, throwing in as much stuff as you can, to playing something that ties in with the chord of the moment. So I'll do a little jam in G, coming back to our key of choice, our key of start. Anyway, I figure if we get G, it's the first full key on the neck. F kind of gets jammed in the corner there. G, you got wiggle room. We can move G up to A and so forth, and then as we transpose, as we move along, we're going to go into other keys more and more, I promise. Now, last lesson we touched down on expanding the major pentatonic as applied to the loop of Let It Be, and I hope that helped you a little bit, learning how to integrate a little bit of sass to the primarily major chord application, major scale, I should say, applications. So I hope that worked for you. I won't elaborate too much more on that tonight in the interest of time. But what I will do is I'm going to speed up the blues a little bit here, and I'm going to just play what I used to play with just minor pentatonic, and then I'm going to do the enhanced thing again to remind you of all the ingredients. And I'm going to try to see if I can remember what they all are. In the heat of the battle, I usually just play whatever I'm feeling, so I'm going to wing it and hope for the best here. So this will be instructional, I'm sure, for you, how to correct your mistakes, or at least cover them over. So here we go. I'm going to put this up to about, from 80 to about, 120. Let's get crazy. Why not? But so I'm going to play the way I used to play, and then I'm going to play the new improved way. Let's see if you can hear the difference. I hope you can. Okay. 2, 3. choppy on the edges, but who's counting? But anyway, those last ones were incorporating more of the ingredients. I hope you can hear that little extra dimension that comes from that. If you prefer the rock one at the beginning, hey, I'm okay with that. Some people won't hear it; they'll hear it different ways. No two chefs spice their food the same way. So but for my thinking, I feel better about my playing when I'm tying in with the chord of the moment. Now that was pretty brisk there, but I just wanted to show that in the heat of the moment, I'm forced to make decisions that you don't have the luxury of time when I'm playing in more instructional tempo, which would be 80 or something. So that was about 120. So how to navigate across the board with these things. The thing I want to talk about tonight was something that somebody presented me a number of years ago. I have a patchwork quilt of scales, and then somebody said there's this concept called power rows, and that's what they call it now. I haven't heard that term very often, but a link up of all these scales, and a lot of players use this without calling it anything at all. And for example, if you're playing in G, you'll see, and you guys may play this way, you may be playing, so you're going behind form 1 in the minor, so then you go up into form 2, okay, that's what this guy, whoever presented to me, called a power row. It links these up. Now I have a sheet, and we'll get around to posting these for you. We'll clean them up and post them. There's a lot on this, so you're not going to be able to see tonight what this is, but I'm going to take it through step by step. Pretty straightforward. There's two of them. There's two of these that traverse and link up the scales. My analogy for this, I like this analogy when it was presented to me, is like if you've ever gone through Minneapolis, God knows they're going through some rough times right now, they have this circle drive. It would be like what would you call it? A bypass route. If you don't want to, if you want to go through Minnesota, but you don't want to go into Minneapolis, St. Paul, but you see this big highway loop around it. If you want to go into town, then you can take one of the exits. If you don't, you can take the bypass. I think of this as like a bypass route. It skims through the scales nicely, most efficient way that I can think of. And if you want to leave the highway loop and go into town on one of the scales, as my analogy, I hope I'm making it clear, then you can opt out, deke out, get out of there and do something, and then get back on the trail and go. So let's, rather than objectifying it, let me give you an example. So the one that everybody knows, the minor for G, I think this was referred to as power row number 1. So it goes through form 1, but it doesn't have to play all those notes. We'll start with a bit of form 5, a chopped off area of form 5, with my first finger starting, and I'll put as many hammer-ons as I can to make this smooth. So I'll hammer, so that's first fret to third fret, then I'll hammer on the next string, 5th string, so, and then slide out. I am now in form 1, okay, so most of you guys already do this. So I'm going to go out, and then I'm going to hammer again, next string, 3 to 5 now, that's the 4th string, and then I'm going to hammer again and slide out. That famous slide from form 1 to 2, I'm now in form 2 minor, right, for G. So what do we have so far? Now I'm going to, you could go, stay with form 2 without any shifts. And now you're in form 3, but out of position, because form 3, as you remember, we'd like to have our 3rd finger there, okay? But don't worry too much about our fingerings. What we're doing now is just getting a way to get from point A to point B fast. And you go back. And you can throw a trill in there. So go back and forth with that until you can't stand it anymore if you've never done this before. And think of the scale of the moment. Now say you had your favorite lick was standard, right? Standard kickoff lick. You could go. See what I'm getting at? So you could use the power row to get through there, but if you happen to be inspired to do something in there, go for it. Now what if you weren't inspired to do anything there, but you were thinking of in form 2, that's your 7th and 6th frets respectively, you could go. Okay, so you get my drift there, so you can get through there pretty quickly, right? So that'd be good for your minor pentatonic on the 4 chord, right, in the key of G, over a C7 chord, strangely enough, right? That would be a great way to get through town and find your way something else. Now, form the power row number 2, we're going to start on the G note itself. Now, if you recall, major form 3 is our next stopping point at the 5th fret, but we usually with middle finger pinky, right? If you recall this one. But we're not going to obey that in the interest of speed and accessibility. We're going to stick with the 1st and 3rd fingers a lot of the time here. So I'm going to go 1st finger to 3rd, or you could hammer it and slide out. So that's 3rd, 5th, 7th, 1st finger to 3rd. Now I'm in the 5th position, right? Hammer 5 to 7, 5 to 7 again, slide out. You're now in form 4. So can you picture form 4? For major, right? So this is on the 1 chord prior. Go to the next note. There's another root note, another nice G note. So you got, sorry. Now I want to get to form 5 over here, major. Maybe I'll just hammer on. And then finish it up. Go around the corner and come back home. So you can see this is a very nice little legato, you know, smooth thing, a lot of hammers pull up. And say you wanted to get up to form 4, excuse me, in a very effective way, so you could get into some of these juicy that was you want to get from here. See, and don't worry about the fingering too much at that point, just go with whatever you feel. So run up on the power row until you get to a point where one of your favorite licks is located, and then see if you can segue into it nicely. Did you notice how much I stretched on that? We're going to be talking about string bending a lot in the future. Okay, so there's an interesting thing that you can incorporate into your playing, and I showed it to you in G, just so you can kind of make that connection with that. So that's 2 power rows connecting virtually in one way or another all of the scales that we've talked about. So we'll come back to that at a future time, but anyway, it'll be on this sheet, and we'll try to have this posted at some point. It says power rows up there, and it has Sherman's notes there, and there's some charts, and there's some shading, and it's kind of crazy, but I've written out in tab the ascending and descending of each of those power rows. And I hope you'll be able to figure that out. And I can't remember where I showed them in what order, but anyway, if I showed them differently, I apologize. But anyway, that's a good way to start, and it overlaps what we've talked about. Okay, now in the caged system, we're continuing in that. I have one more row of chords. Easy. One more row of chords, and that's the minors right here on the bottom of the sheet, which will be posted, I promise you, at some point or other. And let's go through those minor chords so that you're covered for the three main types of chords. Because guess what? We're going to go into minor blues, and we're going to get into some minor scales. You're going to love the Dorian mode. We'll get into Aeolian. So there's three minor scales coming on the horizon. You have the Dorian mode, which features a lot of Santana textures. You have the Aeolian mode, which is used by a lot of rock guys, hard rock guys and gals. And you've got the harmonic minor scale, which a lot of people think is kind of a snake charmer sound about it, but really the name should be more exotic. Maybe it should be called the snake mode or something, lizard mode. But it's the harmonic minor scale, and we'll be talking about those in depth. Those three essential minor scales. There is one more, the melodic minor, and that one will be used for some other applications, gypsy jazz and so forth. So we'll touch on all those things. Most educators have said that the biggest weakness they've found in people attending schools such as Berkeley and other places in Massachusetts is that they find they're very weak on their minor scales and the applications. And there are some interesting things there that I'll point out to you. But for tonight, I want to make sure you have the chords to back you up across the neck in a caged context. So I'll take off the raunch here, if I can. Broken little tube screamer pedal I have here, doesn't want to cooperate. So we'll start with C minor, okay? So first one I have on the sheet is this A minor shape. Now there is a C minor in the corner here. It's kind of weird looking, sort of. If you took a C and you flattened the third, so you'd have to change your fingering a little bit, but cowboy C and just went, that'll work. So that's your C minor. I won't dwell on that one too much because it's kind of awkward and not one to play very much. But go to the A, so spelling caged. Here's your C minor with an A minor bar. Everybody knows that one. Okay. Next one is kind of a weird shape. You got to be careful. It's just good to know. There are many ways to get around it, but the root C on the 8th fret, middle finger 6th fret, lay a little baby bar down carefully on the 5th fret. But don't, because then you've got, oh, that would be terrible. So I have an X. I have some X's there. Just don't hit it. Or if you're playing fingerstyle, just go. That'll work just fine. So it's just so you know it's there. C major, if you recall, was this, but we can't do it now. I suppose you could do this. I don't even like it, so I don't want to do it. But you could fashion something on the 8th fret like that, and maybe this. That might work. You can come up with something 6, 5, 8, 8, 8. But for now, this is a better rhythm chord because you got a bass, a root note. Okay? Don't dwell on it too much for now, but at least know it's there. And now you're in, that would be the, that would be the A, G, minor shape, and here's the E. Looks a lot like E minor, doesn't it, with these fingers? So there you go. Everybody knows this one. Here's one that's lesser known, getting into D, the D. So there's your C minor at the 10th fret. I'm laying a little bar down, but you can just do it like this. So 10 to 13th fret. So there's your minor chords. So you can really do a lot with that. And if you get those, fill in some gaps. If you're playing an A minor, somebody's doing that. Occasionally go up here and grab this. Put on a little bit of chorus there if I had a drum beat. Go up here for this one. Okay, so you can see there's some merit in those. I think I skipped one of them here, so let's see if I can find where I am here. We were going all the way across, yeah, there we go. Lost there. And you've got this little guy here. So that's 13, 12, 13, 15. So what is that? That's just this in a higher position. And already you can see, if you know these chords, you can begin. I don't think of chords as static things. I'm not going to talk too much about chords because our whole thing is improv, but you need this is going to help our cause. But while you're fooling around with these chords, work the bass notes a little bit. I don't think of chords as static things. At one time I did, but you'll notice that stretch is kind of a little awkward, uncomfortable. What if you were to move it? Oh, you start to hear a little bit of Stairway to Heaven, don't you? So what did I do? I just kept the nugget, the triad, as it were, and I just moved, but I had to change my fingering. So if you can focus on 13, that one, just go. So you can find a lot of interesting things. Down here where you had this, you could move the pinky along, like so. And then switch your fingering. So what are you moving? You're moving a thread of melody through the chord. There are names for each of those chords. If you want a name for it, I'll give it to you. C minor / major 7th, because you're putting a major 7th. James Bond kind of sound there. And then C minor 7th and C minor 6th. Very pretty sound. So if you relate it to just that first part, A minor, major 7th, A minor 7th, and he goes to D with an F sharp bass. But you could just continue on and go. Most jazz players will do that, and that becoming the A minor 6th. So isn't that fascinating that you can have, instead of just playing A for 4 bars, A minor for 4 bars, you could run a nice little line. Can you play the melody? Oh. So the melody goes across that very nicely. So we'll get into the science of chording as well. But for now, if you feel a chance to move, there's a chance to move a melody within chords, that is not a bad thing. We'll be talking about that. Chords are not carved in stone. They're very malleable. And sometimes you don't need to play a big 6-note chord. The jazz guys have shown that time and time again, where you're just playing. We talked about tritones. Sometimes on the blues they just go. So that kind of thing. And that's fine. That's all you really need, if that's all you need. Sometimes that's the best that you can play. Less is more. You've heard that saying. It really is in accompaniment. Less is more. Leave some holes. Other players have, the analogy is open the window, let some air in there between the chords and the voicings that you use. Don't feel you have to have big lush chords at every moment. So okay, so we talked about that. Now we've got the minor chords on the boards. I wanted to establish power rows. I've done that. Double stops. I want to continue in that mode. I touched on that a little bit last lesson number 9. So we talked about this in here. When you're playing double stops across the neck, when you know all these caged chords, you're going to see the double stops like you never believed. They're everywhere. They're jumping out at you saying, pick me, Whereas if you only know a few, well, that's all you got to work with. So let me see if I can just play around all these chords, since I can kind of see where they are, the G's and the C's and the D's, going back to our mother key. I'm going to just play as many double stops as I can. I'm not going to clutter too much. And I'm going to show you what I could get away with. I wouldn't want to solo like this, but just to show you how you can kind of get your mapping. Okay? So here I go. I'll start with the 7th fret. double stop. Here's another one. So you get crazy and you start harmonizing notes, and of course we talked about tenths a little bit. You fool around with those coming off that chart I showed you, you're going to get all sorts of stuff. Even with the C7 I showed you, the bar, the 5, root 5. Don't be afraid to put some connecting runs there. Shall we say chromaticism? Remember what I talked about? So if you're going, you go, you can relate it all to that lick that almost everybody knows off G. So that's just sixth with an S on it, sixth, and you pinching, if you're, I'm using the hybrid here, and that I ended up on a D7. So you can kind of, kind of go nuts on that and kind of go around from chord to chord, but I'm steering it by the chords, and you can hear even without a backing track, you can kind of tell what chord I'm on. That's when I think you're onto something. If you need a backing track and you're constantly one note astray of the chord, you're not quite there. So you have to budget your time. I think budgeting time is very important, but always having in one corner of your mind a sense of what chord are we on that moment. The old Joe Pass thing of grab your hand if somebody else can't do it for you and say, what chord are we on right now? And do you know it? Do you know what chord it is? Even when you're playing with a backing track, are you just zoning out and going into a blissful state? Well, that's fine. Get into that state, but don't get too deep into the state where you forget what chord you're on. At least have some reference of where you are. I think you owe that to the other players you're working with. Not just melodically, I would say rhythmically, the way you phrase. Drummers will thank you for that. Bass players will thank you for playing in a register that's not competing with them. So there's a lot of factors here. So coming up on the horizon, next time I'm going to talk to you about solo theme and contour and construction, and how to take a block of time and budget your time and come up with something that is sort of thematic, shall we say, and you'll be able to start and not just going up the neck, although that can be effective to build tension as you go and build suspense, but using all the ingredients that we've talked about, trying to make them all come together under one roof. As I say, that's my favorite phrase, under one roof. Think about what the bass is doing, think about what the melody, the upper voices are doing, and then think about the middle. So that's sort of the way you think about a complete band. You've got different frequencies, and so as you move along thematically, listen to some of the solos that you most love. Could be anything, Billy Gibbons or anybody. Think about how that solo sticks in your memory. Why is that? Is it just because you have an association with the song, a girl you knew back then, and it's a fond memory? That can be part of it, but in a technical sense, what makes it stick with you is the emotional factor and the choice of notes and just the way they told a story. So I think of it as like a short story. So think of it like O. Henry and some of the great short story writers. In a few short pages, they set you up with a character, they develop the character, and they have a plot complication, and then they solve it to some resolution. That to me is not a bad way to think of a solo. Start strong, end strong, and get out cleanly, okay? So in that spirit, I'm going to leave you right now. So till next time, namaste. Take care.